Another episode of the Brown Perspective. ¿Cómo estamos?
Brown perspective in uncertain times. ¿Cómo estamos, Romero?
Bien, bien. Uh, when was the last time that we recorded? It must have been last year.
It was 2019. It was a different time. 2020, we knew 2020 was going to be a decisive year because, first of all, the census. We're recording this around census time. You should have gotten your census application. I know it's dorky, nerdy, but fill out your census. If you don't count, you don't count. And then we
And
had the election, but
yeah,
now we have the coronavirus.
and to our faithful viewers, we have two here, two, one. That's probably us. But anyway, I feel compelled to say this that if anybody out there is listening to us, we apologize. It's been some time since we had our last recording, but
Yes.
life happens, and then we've been trying to we can actually we know what's happened is that we're trying to we started our new year resolution by trying to get into better shape, and so we've
That's
been
true.
going to the gym on Saturdays more often, and the gym started to take away from the time that we can commit to the recording, and so we've had to figure out a way to fit that into our busy schedule, because
Hmm.
Saturdays we're looking at the gym takes about 2.5 hours with the entire trip, and then by the time we get there, come back, and then it's all done. And if we try to squeeze the recording there, it means that Eduardo is going to be spending half the day with me instead of spending half the day with his wife, and that's not gonna
That's no
roll.
bueno. But hey, but you have responsibilities too. You have a son that you're taking care of, and then, but I think it's indicative of getting older, right? Like you start prioritizing your health, time with your loved ones. But also, I think that this is a very important space for us to connect, and also kind of help process what's going on. There's a lot of going on, and I know among other things that happened, Bad Bunny released his album too, which is increíble. Candela, pura candela es el álbum de Bad Bunny.
You're gonna have to give me a pass on this one because I know him, but I don't follow him the way that you do. But
Oh man.
maybe you can tell me a little bit more about the album once, unless you think discussing Bad Bunny is a top priority over discussing coronavirus.
Say let's go with coronavirus. Let's go Democratic primary and presidential elections,
Yeah.
and then let's finish with the berry on top,
Hey,
which is Bad Bunny.
by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if you hesitated there for a second, thinking, yeah, maybe we could start off with Bad Bunny.
You got to have your priorities straight.
Yeah. I don't think there's really no need to give a huge recap on what's going on with the coronavirus. We know it started out in China, in Wuhan, spread to initially Italy, Iran, South Korea, and then as the time progressed, it started getting more and more out of hand in Europe, whereas in China, because of the measures that they took, and then also in South Korea, because of the incredible testing that they were doing, they were able to at least slow down the increase. And now it seems like it's plateaued and it's even on the decline in South Korea. But just,
Flatten the curve, they call it.
yeah. And then recently, just this week, the United States now, or the World Health Organization now declared Europe as the epicenter of the virus.
Yeah.
And when we're talking right now, as we speak, Spain is trying to institute or clamp down and institute curfews and even quarantine so that they can contain this. And I think they're trying to be a little more aggressive than Italy because of what
Hmm.
happened in Italy. And Italy was at first trying to resist imposing what you would call draconian measures, that they
Hmm.
look at what the Chinese did and they say those were draconian measures, but in China they worked. But it's a lot harder to try to impose those in the Western democracies. But
Yeah. Although they say that the Italians have, surprisingly so, adapted to the new rules and the new quarantena. And I know yesterday I saw it on social media that one of the things that was going viral was the Italians going out to their porches and singing as a group, which is nice to see because usually when you see people gathering outside or in Latin America, I know we also talked about some of the unrest, political unrest that's happening in Latin America. And it's interesting because obviously all of that now goes to the back burner. But usually in Latin America, you hear people with the pots and making noises because they're upset. And now you have another situation where people are just singing and trying to live through this quarantena, which is amazing. Because I have to say, I traveled to Costa Rica recently, and I do have to say that between living from LAX, going to Panama, going to Costa Rica, and coming back, and in Panama, I heard a little bit of Italian. I mean, in Panama is where the continent of the Americas and the world come together. So you definitely, I had a more of a, I was paniqueado, como decimos,
Yeah.
paniqueado. You say, estás estornudando, and then you see people who are either with their mask on, which is good, but then you see people who are obviously sick, who cough and then cover their mouth, or then sneeze and clean their nose, and then they're still holding the paper that they're going to give to the immigration officer. So you definitely become more aware of your surroundings during a pandemic.
Everyone all of a sudden becomes a germaphobe.
Yeah.
This is what it's like to be OCD and be a germaphobe. The
How-
scrutiny, that the way that you're looking at other people suspiciously, and how you track every single one of their movements, like where their hand goes and then they touch their face and then the face goes somewhere else and then they shake your hand. All of
I
that
was like,
stuff. What?
I now understand Romero.
Well, I'm not like that. Just disclaimer. I do have a little bit of OCD, but it's never been on the germaphobe side. Mine has been more on the being neat and organized. Like, but this is more about organization, like hanging your clothes and grouping all the pants together and the shirts. That's just, it just seems like it's common sense to me. I'm gonna push back
Yeah.
and push back on you guys and say you guys are sloppy. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just organized. But the germaphobes, those guys are. It's a little bit more difficult for them, and
Yeah.
you get an insight into how they have to live every single day of their lives. The
Because you
paranoia that they have.
realize, go ahead.
No, I was gonna just say that the paranoia that they have to live with.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You realize how dirty we as people and humans are. And, and it's funny because one of the first things they tell you with coronavirus is, don't touch your mouth, don't touch your face. And then once you become aware of it, you realize how many times, you put your finger in your mouth or you touch your eyes. And it's funny because now that you're aware of it, you're trying to avoid it, but you still do it. And then it's like, oh, but I don't want to get up again and wash my hands. I'll use sanitizer because it's gonna dry my skin up. So it's interesting how, and then it's kind of like, well, everything has germs, and some of these germs are good for you, and hopefully they also are helping you have a healthy immune system.
Yeah, this is not one of those good germs. And by the way, that brings up an interesting topic, because the more you think about how it spreads, and as you just mentioned, that we touch our faces and we're constantly we're vehicles of transmission for these viruses ourselves, because we interact so much with each other, and then we even have customs like the French kissing each other, shaking hands, and all of that.
Or the
It
Latino kiss, right? Well, at least one kiss.
Yeah, the Latinos and the French go too. But look at how it transmits. So it seems to spread easily from person to person, especially in homes, hospitals, and other confined spaces. The pathogen can travel through the air, envelop in tiny respiratory droplets that are produced when a sick person breathes, talks, coughs, and sneezes. That's like the flu. And what do we know about the flu?
It is a flu.
Yeah, but it may actually spread a lot easier, because I believe people may be asymptomatic for a little bit longer. I don't remember where I read that. I'll have to double check. But if that's the case, there's no way to avoid it. Like, part of you
Hmm.
has to at some point say everyone's gonna get this thing, just like the way everyone's gotten the flu. And it's possible that certain governments have already come to this realization, and what they're just trying to do at this point is not overwhelm the healthcare system.
Yeah, this is precisely what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and but people are still freaking out because they don't want to get it, and that freaking out is what actually makes things worse. I went to the
And
store
that's why you have
yesterday.
to go get toilet paper, bro.
Dude, I don't
Get that
understand.
toilet paper. You got toilet paper?
What is it with toilet paper? And it's not even an
That's such an
American thing.
American thing,
No,
dude.
it's
It's
not,
like
because there were people fighting in Australia long before they were fighting in the US.
hashtag first world problems.
Did you? There was the first videos that started surfacing were of people in Australia at the grocery store fighting for toilet paper.
I think what it is, I think toilet paper and going to the bathroom in peace is such a normal thing, right? It's like fundamental. Like going to the bathroom is fundamental. And when there's something that may and you're right. I think this is where the psychology, the tribe psychology impacts because now, oh, like my kids are gonna be here, my family is gonna be here. I need toilet paper. Oh crap, I'm running low. Let me make sure I get toilet paper, and then oh, let me go to Costco where I get all this toilet paper. It's like, really? Do you really need all that toilet paper?
Yeah.
Um,
And
it was interesting.
most stores do in institute limits because people will try to hoard and they will try to take everything in the aisle, and then that's why people start fighting because you go to the store, and even if you're a rational person and you're just going to get enough of a supply for a week or two, because that seems reasonable, there's people that go in there and try to take everything for weeks,
Yep.
months, and then other people see this and say, hey, what are you doing? You can't take all of that, and they start fighting each other. But
Yeah, but
if you're out there in that situation, don't do that because more than likely the stores already have policies that will not let people take more than say if you're one person, then you can probably only take a roll of 24. Maybe that's your max. But if you're in a family, they might have a different policy. They might let you take more. Uh, I'm not too sure, but the stores have something in place to try to avoid those confrontations.
yeah, and I think this gets us to the part of the conversation and tying it to the current presidential election. And I think it's interesting in some ways you're seeing the capitalist response and the authoritarian socialist response, right? So you see how China reacted and some of the measures they had to put in place and some of the measures that were able to put in place because how authoritarian they are. And then here in the United States where it's capitalism and people don't, that's, and I know some people made this point on a couple of memes like saying like if you're upset about people hoarding toilet paper, you should be upset about the 1% hurting hurting all of the wealth out there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because in some ways it is a test of how, there's a reason why there's those the stores have those policies, and there's a reason why the government has to step in times of crisis because you need government. And I think this is a perfect example for people who argue for small government. And some people are arguing that maybe some of the lack of funding that the CDC, the Centers for Disease Controls, was getting under this Republican administration is one of the reasons that our reaction was so poor compared to the South Koreans and others.
These young progressives, they don't they don't let an opportunity go by, do they, to criticize the 1%?
Hey man, it's true though.
Let me. I need to say
There's
something.
some truth. There's some truth.
I hear
I
you.
welcome I welcome other comments.
I hear what you're saying. And I'm with them too because yeah, you should be upset if you're upset at people hoarding. You should be upset at the 1% hoarding most of the wealth, which is this is
Hmm.
a topic that we touch on here. But I will. I want to come back to China, and I want to push back a little bit on what we hear on the mainstream media because I'm all about trying to not just repeat what the media is telling me regarding China. Because there
Hmm.
were reporters in China that were talking to the people and they were assessing the situation on the ground when supposedly China was imposing these draconian measures on the people. It
Hmm.
wasn't even the government that had to force people to do these things. The people themselves were so organized and wanted to help each other out and wanted to do it for their country that
Hmm.
they themselves were doing a lot of these things on their own.
Hmm.
And so, from their point of view, they didn't see it as this heavy handed government clamping down on them and doing these things. They all agreed and cooperated with it. So, the way that we get fed what's going on in China is completely different because it gets interpreted through a westernized lens where we
That's true.
think, look at all those things, they're bad for you. But from the Chinese point of view, remember the Chinese have seen their wealth incredibly increase in the last 30 years. Their position in the world, they've gone from they've lifted how many people out of poverty? 400 million, or I don't even know how many. You literally have within a generation, somebody went from living in a village to now
Hmm.
being incredibly wealthy. And obviously you have your disparities. You have your 1% or 2% or however many that are hoarding the wealth also, but you have a ton of people that have moved into the middle class. And
Hmm.
from their point of view, they don't care how the government runs. They're fine with it because the government is helping them. And a lot of people feel that way. So apart from, yeah, sure, it has its criticisms, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm defending it, but
Yeah.
I also don't want to just very one dimensionally characterize China the way that CNN here will. Because look at
No,
what,
that's-
yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, look at what happened initially when they were criticizing China for its draconian measures, and now Europe is trying to do something similar because they've realized that if you're going to contain this virus, that's probably the only way that you're going to do
Hmm.
it, because otherwise it's going to spread.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because I recently watched The Farewell, which is that movie by Aquafina about not to give something a lot of the plot away, but basically is the grandmother has a terminal illness, and there's this debate between letting her know that she has an illness, and
Hmm.
well, the Chinese family decides that no, we're not going to tell her.
Yeah,
This is our burden to carry. It's
yeah,
about keeping her comfortable and happy for the rest of her life. And then the American granddaughter is about, well, why don't we tell her? She has the right to know and all these things. But I know one of the things, and unfortunately I could because it was one of the flights and I didn't see the end. I think she does know. The grandmother knows because I think she noticed things. But the bottom line is there's an explanation of Chinese look at this from a family, from a collective thing. It's not just what's good for me and what makes me feel better. It's about how do I make sure that my country, my grandmother, my family are the ones that are fine, even if I have to suffer or I need to pitch in, sacrifice a little bit now for the greater well-being.
yeah, and how you interpret things, the way that you react, the way that you process and live within a society is tied, it's tethered to whatever social norms that society has. So from
Hmm.
an outside perspective, we could say that's terrible. Why don't they just tell her? They should. Well, sure,
Hmm.
but then, well, what are the consequences? What are the pros and the cons? And like you said, from their point of view, they see different aim, they have a different aim, and they
Yeah.
want to achieve a different goal from doing that. But maybe we can discuss that a little bit later. I want to switch back to the topic of the this coronavirus, because so we've discussed what's going on around the world, and now we have to talk about the United States, because the United
Hmm.
States is actually lagging it when it comes to this. So I'm not an alarmist, and I'm not too concerned about the coronavirus itself, because, well, we have the privilege of being young, but right,
Hmm.
so it's not going to affect us as much. You definitely have to take it serious in the sense that you don't want to go out there and be in public gatherings if you're then going to turn around and be around those that are vulnerable in their
Yeah.
health. So I don't want to take that lightly. But I'm not as concerned about the virus. I'm more concerned about people's overreaction to it. And from what I can
Hmm.
see in the supermarkets, I can already see that people are starting to freak out. Well, that's nothing, because my wife works in the medical industry.
Hmm.
She's a nurse practitioner, and she told me that they just started testing for
Wow.
coronavirus yesterday.
Hmm.
So we already have 2,000 cases in the country, and then how many deaths we have? About 50. I think, yeah, it's a 50. If we just started testing, it's been weeks since it's been out there. It's been, and
Hmm.
it's been spreading. So the tests usually take a few days. I forget how many days she said that it takes for the test results to come back. When these results
Like
come
two or
back,
three, right?
yeah, when these results come back, and we find out that it's really 10,000, 20,000 now, I think people are going to freak out. And
Yeah.
we don't know what that means. So if people out there are trying to figure out what may happen with the United States in the next few weeks, the template is Europe. The template is not China, because we're not going to do what China did, and we're not going to do what South Korea did, because even if we wanted to, there's no way that we can test 3,000 people they were testing a day.
Hmm.
It was really efficient how they were doing it, and we just started testing after weeks of the virus getting here. So look to Italy and maybe Spain, and what's
So
happening.
what's happening there?
Quarantines.
Mm.
You're shutting down entire cities, and we've already shut down the NBA. We've already shut down schools. The next thing that might come to the U.S. is quarantines, because we're following their footsteps. Just the U.S. will be whatever Italy is right now. That's our future in 2 weeks. Italy or
Yeah,
Spain.
I think there was a nice graph that I saw that sort of showed the curve, right? It showed sort of the progression of the infection, and it showed the different countries, and it showed how, if you think of a bell curve and you think of China already towards the right hand of it, already kind of past the peak of the infection and everything in the US, in other countries still on the rise. So I think you're definitely right that we're sort of trailing China as it relates to the spread of the disease and how many numbers we start hearing about.
Yeah, and this is the type of stuff that gets people all worked up. When you say keep a 30-day supply of essential medicines, there's no way that you can give people that recommendation without them freaking out and going to the store and then buying not just essential medicines but trying to buy everything that they think is essential.
Hmm.
What was the
And
other?
it's funny because I was at Home Depot this week and I was like, should I get the emergency packet? I was like, no, I'll get it later.
Did you
Probably not gonna
guys?
need it.
Yeah. By the way, on a personal level, have you guys been stocking up on food? Have you been rushing for water and toilet paper like everyone else?
No, I mean we have water. We have like a water supply service, so that's good. And then we do have some toilet paper, and then some of my cuñadas and cuñados have shopped. So I think if worst comes to worst, we would could drive over there and get a packet if we need it. But right now is I think that I'm also hoping that stores are going to be replenished sometime soon, and that people are going to realize that okay, this is not like an imminent threat. Like this is probably going to be the new normal. We just got to be careful. Don't panic. Just proceed with calm. Because in some ways, it reminds me of a snow day back in the East Coast, right? Like the storm is coming, and you want to get ready. You think you want to need all these things, but then the storm comes and goes, and then life kind of goes back to normal a bit.
Things might get worse before they get better, though, because
Hmm.
we haven't peaked yet, and
Yeah.
like I said, the hospitals just started testing, so we don't know what that number is for the number that are infected, and if that number comes back, um, if that number is considered high, and I'm not really sure what that is. I don't know if 10,000, 20,000, 50. Hard to say. But if depending on where that number comes, you may see people start freaking out even more. And then as a result, it's the people that are going to demand that the government take these draconian measures because the government's going to need a way to calm them down.
Hmm.
And going back to the thing about water, like don't people use filters at home? I don't buy any water. I just use filters. I use this one. I probably shouldn't give them free publicity to the one or two people that listen to our show. But if you go to Amazon, you can still buy these things, and they're not overpriced. So what
So
is it
how's that
about?
work? You just put
Yeah,
is it for a
It's like a Brita filter, so it has a
Brita filter?
container.
Got it.
Yeah, so where's the container? They don't have it, but it comes with its. These are replacements, so
Hmm.
you should already have the jug where the
Yeah,
water. Uh, yeah, like this right here. So
it
you put
looks
the
like that.
filter in there,
Yeah.
and you fill the top. It falls in, and it one of these filters gives you like 50 gallons. I don't know how many. It usually lasts me about a week or two, depending on how much we're using. Don't people use? Yeah, people have a high dependence on filtered water. And by the way, it's not
Yeah.
like the city's gonna run out of water. Th- this isn't zombies taking over and polluting the water, or us getting attacked, and then the water system breaks down. The pipes are there, and the city's gonna keep pumping water. Why would they stop? So
Yeah.
worst
No,
case
it's a good
scenario,
point.
you have tap water to drink, and you're not gonna die if you drink tap water for a few weeks. You may get sick
That's true.
at
But
some
again,
point.
that's a very American thing. Like, part of it is a lot of the American people haven't struggled, haven't been poor, haven't kind of growing up in a Latin American country like you and I have had, right? Like we've experienced what it is to maybe have to clean yourself with um like newspaper, right? Like you know what it is to kind of not have hot water, all these things. So I think there's a lot of comforts that people sort of take for granted that now kind of get a lot of fear starts with that, right? And I think that since they haven't experienced that, they're so afraid that something's gonna happen or that's gonna be a horrible experience. So anyways, I think that that's why there's so much. I think that's why how the saying goes, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And I
Yeah.
think that's where also like leadership and what the government does and what other community leaders do to help keep people calm and focus on what needs to be done, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm with you, by the way. I'm with you on the assessment of what it means to come from Latin America. I definitely think some of those things apply, but let me just add more light or shed more light into that. I'm with you when it came to the toilet paper because I don't remember it being as smooth and as soft. I don't even remember what it is that we used back then. I was 8 when I came, but
Hmm.
probably something as rough as toilet paper, as newspaper. But we had hot water because to shower. You guys shower with
Hmm.
cold water? Because look, we didn't have a shower where we had running water. You had it's like a cauldron, the las tinas, or you had something where you would go, but the water was hot. We would just heat it up and it would take forever. But we used to,
Yeah, well, we heat it up with. You had to heat it up in the stove.
yeah.
Like it wasn't until years later then
Yeah, I'm just
that
clarifying
we
that. I'm
actually
just
had
clarifying that we had the
like a
luxury
warmer.
of warm water, even if we came from Latin America. And then the other thing,
Yes.
when it comes to drinking water, we actually had clean water because we had a natural well in our town, so we were getting clean water most of the time. It wasn't until the U.S. that we came over here when we got tap water, which is
Hmm.
wasn't as clean. Obviously, it's purified it gets purified and processed before it gets to us, but there's still a lot of stuff in it. So yeah, I'm still surprised. I thought I honestly I wasn't even thinking about this from an angle of I come from Latin America and this is how I think. I was just thinking of an angle from a point of view of just being practical and being logical about what's actually essential. And water to me does not seem as essential. If you're talking doomsday and you're running out there to the store to buy the stuff that you definitely cannot live without, I'd be people should be buying food then if that's the case
Yeah.
because water again water's not going to run out. It would take a war and it would take like a complete destruction of the infrastructure so that the water will stop running. That the city is not going to go bankrupt. They have emergency funds. And even you know what, even food, right? Even food, it's very unlikely that we run out of food because what could happen is if things start getting out of hand, then the government's going to step in and they're going to make sure that they institute these what they consider draconian measures, and they're going to start rationing it so that
Hmm.
everyone's going to get a certain amount, and they'll control the supply lines. So you will not no longer be able to go to the store and hoard. You're just going to have an allocated amount of food that you're reserved to. So I don't think, just to be clear out there, I don't think anyone would die of hunger
Well, I think
if
that's what people want to anticipate, right? They know, oh, if something happens, the government is going to start rationing things off. Let me get everything I need right now in case that happens. So I think that's the natural
right,
reaction to
but
what you're
that's
saying. It's
but
like,
that's what
okay, well, things are not bad now, but they're going to be bad. So before they get worse, let me just make sure that I'm prepared. My family and I are prepared for this.
you think they're defining bad to be. I don't want food to be rationed, and so I'm used to my lifestyle, so I don't want to cut back, even
Yep.
if it's just you
It's
don't
like, don't
think
come for my guns type of thing.
you don't think they're thinking bad is we're gonna run out of food and there's not gonna be any food, because I think people are thinking along those lines, and
Yeah, and that's the thing, because I don't think people have had to think. I think most people in the United States have not had to think about that. Like, to be honest with you, like they have not since World War II. I don't think. Maybe there was, the oil crisis back in the was that late 80s,
yeah,
or 70s, the 70s. So there's been
yeah, when OPEC, yeah,
generations of people who have experienced uncertainty, right? The Cold War, like potential of nuclear war and all those things. But I think for the last 20 years or so, I don't think people have experienced this level of like, oh my God, like something could happen that's gonna affect my phone and my ability to get delivery to my house, right? Or something like that, right? And it's even more convenient now, but I think that's part of the issue. People don't know how to live in a rationed way, right? Either
well,
because you don't have money or you don't have wealth, or because you're in the middle of a national emergency that requires you to sacrifice.
maybe, but I don't know. A lot of the people in America are in pretty bad shape these days. This isn't the America from the 80s. This isn't the America that we came to in the early 90s.
Good point.
There's a
Good
lot of
point.
people that are out there that have been in the struggle and
Mm-hmm.
bankrupt because of healthcare bills. Things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. And I would say that if people are actually thinking it all the way through like that and saying and trying to go through the process of what this means for them, those are probably the people that are not going to freak out. I think the people that are freaking out are the people that don't know what's coming. There's uncertainty, and they can
Mm-hmm.
tell you if they're freaking out over the government having to institute rationing on food, or if they're freaking out because they think the food's gonna run out.
They're
I
just
don't.
freaking out. They're
They're
just
just
fucking.
freaking out.
Everybody's
Exactly.
freaking out. Somebody's freaked out. I need to be
Yeah.
freaked out
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And so they're just following along. And the problem with that is the point that I wanted to make is that I don't think that anyone would die of hunger, but more people will die if they go to the store and they start fighting for toilet paper. That's where
And
people
standing in lines and stuff like that.
that's where the real risk is. If you panic and you end up in a situation where you're
Hmm.
fighting somebody else for something that you think is not going to be available in the future, and then that person can, if we have Americans have a lot of guns, and so that person will people will start killing each other for these things, and that's where the risk is. And
Yeah.
but by the way, though, just a disclaimer, um, a lot of my predictions usually end up being wrong. So take what I say with a grain of salt. Because 4 years ago, I was absolutely sure that there was no way in hell that Trump would win the presidency.
Well, I think you and millions of people were on that boat, but look what happened.
And maybe this is a good segue into what's going on with the Democratic primary. And I can go
Yes.
first if you want, because I need to
Please
vent.
do.
I need to vent a little bit.
Oh man, I'm waiting. I've been waiting for this all this time. I was like, man, I
You
wonder
already
what
knew.
he's thinking.
You already know what I'm gonna say about the Democrats, man.
Do it, bro. Do it.
Dude, they just banded together in order to screw over the progressive side of the Democrats. The part of the
Hmm.
Democrats that's trying to shift the side to be more progressive, to be anti-war, to do all these things that we feel help people in a better way. And I'm not saying Bernie Sanders is perfect because the guy is not completely anti-war. If you want
Hmm.
someone like that, you want a Tulsi Gabbard. But Bernie Sanders at least it shifts the politics of the Democrats a little bit more to the progressive side.
Yep.
And like I don't want to get into his policies when where people say he's socialist and he's going to bankrupt the nation. Well, we're already spending a ton of money in wars anyway. Why don't we just
Hmm.
take that money and instead help the people? That's my argument with Bernie Sanders. So like all these libertarians that would want to point the finger at Bernie Sanders and say that he's a communist, dude, we're already spending so much money. We're wasting it away in so many things that make no sense. Put somebody in there that's actually going to try to allocate the money and then help people. And whether that's helping people with kids with college, improving the healthcare system. Look, man, Biden is not gonna give us any of that. He's gonna go in there, and these Democrats are corporate Democrats. They don't stand for the people. When they go out and they talk to the people, and they give their speeches, these are scripted speeches where
Hmm.
they they essentially they co-opt the language of progressives and liberals. They speak the language, but when they get into office, they don't care about the people. Their policies never help the people that they claim to represent.
Well, yeah, but I think it's a spectrum, right? So I think it's because I think the sort of the corporate Democrat title is interesting because I think it does entail understanding and having a familiarity with industry and knowing that yes, you need money, but you also the problem with the healthcare system is not purely about money, it's about inefficiencies within the system. And granted, a lot of those inefficiencies and things that are wrong with the healthcare system, whether it be prescription drugs or the cost of procedures and things like that, a lot of that is driven by industry, right? By companies trying to innovate, trying to change things. So that's that. But like there's this also the understanding that you do need to have some sort of incentive for people to perform better, to deliver service better and do those things. And I agree with you. I think some people who are more moderate are not comfortable going to where Bernie Sanders is, but at the same time, I think Bernie Sanders, because of the how wide his appeal has been with young people, with the Latinos, he's helping sort of shift the center of the party towards that more progressive part. And I know it's not, and I know Biden. Trust me, I was not super excited about Biden, but I think that, and in some respects it's sort of very similar to what happened last time around, because last time around Hillary Clinton was the nominee just because she's a Clinton and she had worked it, she had earned it, she sort of Obama beat her, and it was almost kind of like, okay, Hillary, you're next, tag, you're it. And she didn't have an opposition. So in some respects, Biden had to fight off a lot of other centrists, and then eventually they came together to try to fight sort of what people perceive as socialism. So yeah, so it's interesting to see what how the next and so far, and I don't know if it's because of what's going on right now with the corporate. I mean, not with the corporate, with the coronavirus, that now we're sort of in a state of emergency. Not only there's a virus, there's uncertainty in the financial markets. So now people are going to look for someone who is more steady, trusted leadership, and even if he sounds corporate, he sounds like somebody who knows what they're doing.
He's being shoved down the throat of American people by the establishment. The guy offers he doesn't offer anything. He was with Obama when they deported even more people than Bush.
Yeah,
He's not good on immigration. The guy is pro Wall Street, pro war, pro the medical industry. They're not going to change any of that.
yeah,
And
he's
what?
a career politician. I
Yeah,
mean, he's
and
been in there
yeah,
for he represents Delaware, which is one of the a lot of the there's very little regulation of the financial sector in Delaware and things like that. So yeah, you're right. He represents that part of I guess the establishment. But now
right.
it's
Which
like, is that establishment worse or better than that the current Trump administration?
well, look, he's going to be slightly better than Trump. He's not going to just go up there and make a fool of himself. Well, maybe he will because it's Biden. But look, comparing yourself to Trump, it's setting the bar so low because Trump is a
Yeah.
buffoon. And so, but when it comes to policies that actually hurt people, Biden is going to give you the same thing as Obama, as Bush before that, as Clinton before that, and as Bush first before that, which has caused the 1% to have even more wealth, has caused the healthcare system to just completely go out of control. And if
Hmm.
you listen to libertarians and people that say, well, you don't want a single payer healthcare system because you don't want the government doing anything because the government is bad for you. We want private industry. These guys, like, they always talk like they want private industry and they trust the private sector so much. Then they never talk about what happens when the private sector gets so much influence that they can just go and lobby Congress to do whatever the hell they want, which is
And when
exactly
they
what.
fail, and then we have to
Yeah, and then we have to bail
bail
them
them
out.
out.
It's like, okay, fine, give me the free market that you're talking about. Give me a society that actually has that, a free market that doesn't get out of hand with monopolies, and then the free market itself starts influencing the politics of it. And once they
Hmm.
start influencing the politics of it, it's no longer a free market. What you're left with is corporatism now, where the corporations send lobbies, send people to lobby in Washington, and then they set the rules, and then they protect each other. So right now, what happened when Obama tried to pass the Affordable Care Act, and he tried to put single payer healthcare system in there, the entire industry banned it against him, even though
Hmm.
on the one side they were pretending like they were for reform, but then behind closed doors, they were actively lobbying against the single payer option, the public option, and against anything that would cut down on their profits. They liked the mandate that was forcing more people to have to get healthcare, but they
Hmm.
didn't like certain things like having to accept people with pre-existing conditions and so forth. So the reason why, just so I don't get off track, what I'm trying to say is that Biden gives you the same of all of that. And
Hmm.
I was listening to someone 2 days ago talk about this, and he made an excellent point when somebody asked him, "Who do you want to win?" And this is a guy that is, an economist. He's made a lot of money. I would have thought that he would have leaned Republican, like most people, and would have been, trying to give Bernie Sanders the socialist label. That's propaganda, just trying to give him, trying to attach him to the socialist, because there's still this memory in America's mind about socialism being bad and
Yep.
terrible. So what he said was, I would actually want Bernie Sanders to win because he's the only guy that's going to come in here and he actually believes what he's saying, and he's the one that has the highest likelihood of ripping this system apart. And not saying that ripping the system apart is actually could be good for it, because it could actually backfire in some ways, but then you get to rebuild it. You get to rebuild it and you come up with something better if Bernie Sanders' policy do screw things up. The problem with Biden is you're just going to get more of the same, more accumulated wealth in the 1%, more misery onto Americans. And the middle class has been shrinking. It's been shrinking a
Hmm.
lot in America, and it's going to keep shrinking with Biden. And by the way, now with the coronavirus and the way that Trump is handling it, it's almost, again, here I am making predictions, but it's almost a given that Trump is going to lose because the
Mm.
economy is about to go into recession too. There's no way that you can shut down things. You can shut down the NBA, shut down flights, travel industry, and so forth. That's going to affect a lot of businesses. And so
Yeah.
you saw the stock market what it did in the last week. It tanked almost 30% before it recovered because the government had to step in and infuse a whole bunch of money into the economy. We're pretty much going to get into a recession, and there's no way that Trump's going to win. So, because of the way that the Democrats banded together to essentially battle Sanders, it's almost a guarantee that we're going to get Joe Biden. And, and
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't disagree with you. I think what you said is absolutely right. But I think now we have a crisis, right? So it's going to be a corona health crisis, public health crisis, and you have an economic crisis. So now what some people want is stability, right? So what I agree with you that, Sanders could have, he could have tried to do a lot of the things that you said, and his success might have been, you know, he who knows what his success would have been, because he definitely did not have, if Obama didn't have the political capital to move his agenda forward, I don't think Sanders would has the same has even has much less sort of political support in Congress to get anything done. And who knows what would have happened with the Senate, right? So it will still be divided government. So the
mhm.
Republicans will still have some says, but as at least he will still be able to do executive action. He would bring new people, new ideas, like probably implement do one a few things that would sort of get the country in that direction. I agree with you, but now the problem that you have is that you have a crisis that usually makes people want stability, and Joe Biden represents that stability. And this is from people during the Great Recession, right? There was a failure, and they people believe in FDR, and then the war came, and then he was the reassuring leader who was sort of, helping mobilize the country towards recovery and all, and towards victory. So all that to say that right now, like, what you are saying could happen, but it would take another sort of crisis. So I think right now, you know, Biden gets in, he does his best, he still fails, and then, okay, you know what? Now we need to go with somebody who represents the ideology of Bernie Sanders. And but yeah, but I think it's all difficult to predict at this time, because there's just a lot of uncertainty out there.
Yeah, you know that Trump would have walked all over Biden if it were a normal election cycle, if it wasn't
Yeah,
for the coronavirus.
definitely.
What happened to the Me Too movement, and why is no one calling out Joe Biden for his for his creepy groping of women and putting them in uncomfortable positions for so long? He always does stuff like that. He has a
Yeah.
history. If you just dig a little bit into it, well, and well, that was just a comment on Trump. But what I wanted to say was Bernie's still not out, but he looks like a long shot at this point. He's still gonna
Yeah.
win most of the West Coast, Oregon, when Oregon comes, and then when the other states on the West Coast vote, he still has a really good chance of picking up delegates, and it's gonna be very close when the election cycle's over. He's probably gonna have enough delegates to try to at least force some concessions,
Hmm.
but it's starting to look to me like Elizabeth Warren didn't endorse Sanders because she had already made a deal with Biden. So there's a chance that Biden chooses Warren as his VP. It's a woman,
That's
she's
interesting.
progressive, and she didn't endorse Sanders. If she cared about the progressive movement, she would have endorsed Sanders and they would have unified as soon as it became obvious to her that she wasn't going to win. That would have been the smart strategy because, by the way, I'm not upset at the Democrats for the strategy that they use. The strategy is brilliant because that's what the Republicans should have done 4 years ago. Instead of running each one against Trump, they should have united and backed
Mm-hmm.
one very early on, and that one candidate would have probably defeated Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what the Democrats learned from 4 years ago, that hey, very early on they realized we don't have a guy that's standing out. We need to drop out these other ones, and all everybody needs to get behind just one guy, and it was Biden. So it's a
Yeah.
brilliant move to defeat Sanders. And now if they made a deal with Elizabeth Warren as well, then they just politically outmaneuvered Bernie Sanders. I'm upset because of what that represents, but I'm not hating on the strategy. The strategy is effective. They use a good strategy.
Yeah. Well, I just remember the other point that I wanted to make. I think the reality is, in addition to sort of Biden representing the at least perhaps a better calm experience option of how to deal of how to govern. Fundamentally, though, there's a desire, I think, in American politics, in other politics, Colombian politics too, to have certainty, right? So at least there's a certainty. You have a Republican Party, Party, right? Conservative, more liberal, and I think that there's this, this black and white, right or wrong, sort of a stability that some people fundamentally claim, and I say that because in Colombia there was a huge bloodbath between conservatives and liberals, right, for hundreds of years and fighting each other until they came to an agreement. Okay, you rule for 4 years, I rule for 4 years. You rule for 4 years, you rule for 4 years. But to your point that fundamentally the system is not going to change, and it's only certain points in time where the system changed because it has to, because it fails, right? Because there's a war, or because something like that happens. So I think that other than that, I think people are gonna continue to sort of trust the two-party system and look for that stability because they don't want to end up like a developing country that now is dealing with a lot of other things like a Syria or something like that, right? And understanding that that situation too is complicated because of all of the um, mingling, foreign mingling by the U.S., by Russia, by others in those situations. So,
Yeah, no one's meddling with our politics or with our. If somebody started meddling in external force, we would break into a civil war within a few years too, because somebody
well,
externally could
some say
destabilize
that they
us.
are, right? So I think, I mean, so at least with social media, right? And I think this is what fake news comes into plays and all those things, right? And you yourself speak to the power of the media and how limited in many ways is the information that American voters and American residents receive about what's going on in the world, and it's also very biased news, right? It's not the real, it's not objective, it's not
Who-
self-reflecting news.
Our news or
Um,
the one that we're getting from external sources.
so our news, but then the external sources is like you got to know what sources to trust, right? So you got to, and sort of the news gathering that you do, for instance, is very different and very time consuming, something that the average person does not do and doesn't have the desire to do, honestly, because why do you go through all of that, right? Like why spend so much time trying to get at the truth and understand different perspectives and challenge your own thoughts and ideas and presumptions, because that's freaking exhausting.
Yeah,
At least to me it is, maybe not to you.
yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that because that's really that. But that is what it takes to truly try to arrive at a decision on your own without just going along with what someone else is telling you. And by the way, a quick comment on what you said regarding the external interference. Even if the Russians invested in social media or advertising to try to sway the election to the side of one candidate, what was the figure that they said that the Russians invested? 500,000, $500,000, a million? Okay, so it was some amount.
Hmm.
Compare that to the amount of money that was spent by Michael Bloomberg trying to make a dent in the Democratic primary, and what did that get him? So
Well,
it's
but that's the
overblown,
thing. But he
man.
messed up.
The effect of the influence that any external party is having on the elections is overblown because the amount of money that's being used, that's being funneled into that propaganda machine that they call it, it's very sophisticated, it's negligible. Because look at all the money that gets invested by super PACs, by other by donations, by the candidates' private financing. There's no way. It's overblown. But
But
anyways,
that's a brilliant thing. Is guerrilla warfare, right? So like it's not guerrilla warfare in the battlefield. It's guerrilla warfare in the social media messaging space. So the problem with Bloomberg is that the in California, we have experience, and we, even though I've been here for like almost 5 years, but California has historically, there's a lot of millionaires, billionaires who have tried to run. The other billionaire in the race,
Fiorina,
Tom Steyer.
4 years ago
Steyer.
was Fiorina too, or was that 8 years ago?
Yeah,
Carly
so
Fiorina.
and the thing with politics is like politics is not just about money and about getting your message there. It's like politics is a popularity contest. Do people like you? Do people like what you see? Do you seem like a genuine person? So what Bloomberg was trying to do, I mean, if he would have gotten into the race earlier, maybe, right? It would have been less of a oh, he's just buying it. And I think he maybe had the experience. I don't think he had the excitement that Bernie Sanders and others might have had. But the thing with Bloomberg is like you're trying to sell Bloomberg, and Bloomberg, he's not going to be. It's something that you don't sell. What's brilliant about the foreign interference, at least through social media and things like that, is that you are pitting people against each other, and you're using each other's messaging to tear each other down. So in some ways, you having the country itself targeting and sort of like separating itself, right? Tearing it's separating itself, like polarizing itself, getting to a point where then a crisis or something is so destabilizing that something can happen to that. So I think that's, and I know it's not a lot of money, but it's also about like how you do it. Like if you have the right message, if you are supporting, if you are augmenting the right type of dissidents and just hate, like that's gonna lead you. It might not get you complete system overhaul, but that's gonna be pretty disruptive.
I think you give them too much credit because first of all, nobody does propaganda the way that the United States does. Even when we direct that propaganda outside of our country, when we interfere in other elections, whatever
But
prop. Go ahead.
no, but how long is it gonna take before somebody is better at propaganda comes back to us though?
Maybe eventually, but right now we are the number one because look at what happened with Russia. Even if they were putting out advertisings or trying to funnel money in to sway the election in favor of a certain candidate, look at our reaction to that. It's been 4 years of nonstop propaganda that the Russians influence our elections. That's complete BS. There's no way at all, 0% chance that the Russians influence our election. Yet we ran with that and we used it to spew propaganda onto the population for 4 years. That is a well oiled machine, my friend, a
Hmm.
propaganda machine that we have in this country. And so I don't think we, we've essentially destroyed the Middle East, Syria, Iraq, Libya. Dude, the state of those countries is dire. It's
It is.
the carnage. Yet look at the propaganda and the average American. They have no clue. That is a
They don't
well
see it.
oiled propaganda machine that we have at work because they know what they're doing internally. The news media knows what they're doing. They know what message they want to give. And so I don't know why we got into this topic, but we can take it back to Biden.
But look what Putin is trying to do in Russia now. He's trying to change the constitution to stay in at least 20 more years. But,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, sure. Well, I mean, he shouldn't do that. You know, that's my take on it. But hey, it's Russia. They get, and if whatever the Russian people want, right? Russia's not invading my country. Russia's not invading Latin America. Russia's not invading. Well,
Boy, they would in a heartbeat if they had the opportunity to.
yeah, they
I mean,
would,
there's a
but
reason why they're in Syria and the Middle East too. So,
well,
so that's the
they're
thing.
in.
It's either Russian or American.
Well,
You
don't
you
hold
pick
on.
your poison.
Russia got invited to Syria
Oh,
to fight.
come on, Russia got invited.
Yeah, Bashar al-Assad.
Mm.
He gave them permission. Russia is the only country that's in Syria legally. The United States is in Syria illegally, by the way. We are not authorized to be there. It's a violation um, of like I think it's the UN violation or even a war crime to be in there doing what we're doing. But we don't care because we're in there supposedly fighting terrorists, so we don't have to fight them here. We just use justifications, and I agree with you. I'm not naive enough to think that China or Russia would not act in a similar way to the United States. What you need is a balance between these powers.
Yeah,
They need to be
exactly.
able to keep each other in check. And what you're seeing now is that the United States is trying to destabilize the Middle East like we've always have, and China and Russia are coming in there and checking us and saying, "Nah, you can't just come in here and overthrow Assad the same way that you did it in Iraq." Anyway, I don't want to get too much
That's
into
true.
that. The What we were saying about Biden, what you were saying earlier, which is I wanted to comment on it, which is yeah, people look for comfort, and especially right now with the coronavirus, they'll look for something that's comforting. The drawback is that comfort, it comes with a price, and the price
Hmm.
is that the more that we keep electing these candidates because it's comfortable, because they're familiar, because we think that that's what we want, the more dire the situation gets every 4 years for Americans, like students with student loan debt, Americans going bankrupt because of healthcare issues, the country, the middle class, gradually being decimated, and so you have
Hmm.
now places like Los Angeles where the poverty rate is insane. The number of people that live in the poverty rate, the number of homelessness, like I alluded to this earlier, this is not the country. This country now is not the country that it was 30 years ago, the country that our parents came to, the ideal of it. We have the memory of what it was, and every now and then we still express that memory. But in reality, if you pay attention to what's going on, it's not like that. And people like me,
Are you
I'm trying
suggesting we should make America great again?
yeah, in a different way though. I mean, people like me, I like to think that I'm doing my part by challenging, by speaking up to what I see,
You
and
are.
right. So and so people like the people that me that support Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard, I don't. I'm not out of whack. I'm not this crazy liberal that just wants people to have free things. I just want consistency, right? The one thing that we need to have is, or that's important to me, is consistency.
Hmm.
And someone like a Tulsi Gabbard, I would have supported her over Bernie Sanders because she's consistent. She would
Yeah.
say, if we care about immigrant rights in this country, which me and you we do. There's people that don't, but me and you we do. If we
Hmm.
care about immigrant rights in this country, then what we're saying fundamentally is that we care about human rights. We care about people, that they have basic decent rights or basic decency, and we're going to treat them a certain way. And so, if you're going to be consistent with that, then you're not going to allow the United States to go into Syria and cause a civil war in that country. And see, there's no consistency in politicians that tell you, like Biden, that will tell you that he cares about, that he's now going to tell us that he cares about illegal immigrants, and then he's going to support more funding of Lockheed Martin and all these corporations to go into the Middle East and kill people. You know how many people we accidentally kill with our drone strikes in Afghanistan? We've killed buses filled with children. We bombed a wedding once in
Hmm.
Afghanistan. People were getting
Yeah.
married and we bombed them accidentally. Dude, like, what kind of policy is that, man? And so, look, I'm just looking for the candidate that would give me the most consistency, and that's probably asking for too much because there's no
Yeah.
way that a politician can give you all that. But at least that's where I'm coming from. That's what drives my decision to support a certain candidate.
You're looking for a unicorn, and the horse that gets closer to the unicorn is the horse that you're gonna support.
What is Biden's slogan, by the way? Does he have one?
I don't know,
I
dude.
was Obama's VP.
Something about the soul of America.
Oh, man,
You take
black people really went. They went heavy for Biden, And
Yeah, man,
I
he owns it. Like if the
suppose
next vice president is not an African American, if she's yeah, it needs to be an African American. There's no way Biden
but
cannot. And unfortunately, and to your point, I know you said maybe Elizabeth Warren. I don't think she's gonna. I don't think she's the right choice, unfortunately. But I think Joe Biden, because of the how the African American vote resurrected his election, he needs to have a person of color in the BP role.
it's a calculation. It's gonna depend on what they think they need the most, because you got to remember Biden still has to convince Bernie Sanders voters to vote for him,
That's
because
true.
4 years ago we didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I didn't vote for her.
Yep. Yeah. And a lot of people hate you guys for it.
I voted what I thought was better, man. I'm not gonna be
Yeah,
told
you
who to
voted
vote
your
for.
conscience, bro. That's what we ask our representatives to do, and that's what as citizens we should do.
Biden is not entitled to my vote, and if he wants to get it, then he needs to earn it. It's as simple as that, right? So
Hmm.
he has to concede somehow, and he has to get Bernie supporters to vote for him, and that would be by getting Elizabeth Warren under him. Maybe not Bernie. I think that he's gonna take the African American support, and he's not gonna give him anything in return. And
Mm.
although those calculations may shift dramatically based on how Trump is squandering this response to the coronavirus, and if the economy goes into recession, Biden can have a blank check for vice president,
Hmm.
because it doesn't matter who he chooses, he's gonna win. He's not gonna
Hmm.
give a he's not gonna care about people like me that may not vote for him. And by the way, look, we're in California. California goes Democrat anyway. So if anything, if you're in a state where you already know that it's gonna go Democratic, don't vote for Biden. Vote for a third party candidate, so you can at least give them support, and they can have like 5, 10, or whatever percentage, so that these guys, Democrats and Republicans, so they can actually start fearing a viable third party candidate in the future. Why
Hmm.
would I vote for Biden if California is already going Democrat anyway? I'd rather put my support somewhere, a third party to push back against these two parties. You got to do it strategically the way that they do it. That's a good strategy, I think.
Yeah, I
But
do think that one of the lessons from this elections, I think there's the likelihood of a viable third party is getting closer, and I think climate change was one of those issues that maybe is broad enough and popular enough that may be what it sort of helps um, that in healthcare too. I think if and more than because in reality, Sanders is an independent, and one of the reasons that a lot of establishment Democrats don't like him is because he was an independent for a whole lot of time, and then he eventually. But that said, obviously he voted with Democrats in order for them to have the majority of power. But I think the in the not too distant future we'll have at least another party, and who knows, maybe another one would emerge, and it will be a multiple party system where obviously there will be a lot more political calculations, sort of what's happening in Israel right now with the elections. But obviously that creates different issues too.
yeah, there's no guarantee that having 3 or 4 parties make things any better. It might just create more gridlock if you don't have a majority.
Yeah, and fundamentally is liberal and conservative. Those are the two sort of polar poles.
But
You
the
know,
Democrats
zero,
must
zero and one, zero and one, baby.
the
I'm saying it
Democrats
in a way that you can understand. Zero and one
in the future we say
in the
affirmative.
future.
You remember that from the Flight of the Concords? I don't know if you saw that show.
Oh yeah, I
It was just
remember. That was before I could afford HBO, son, or
how,
Showtime, whatever it was.
yeah, I think it was HBO. Well, I didn't see it on HBO. I saw it years later. My brother, he brought the DVD. He bought the 2 seasons, and so then he brought it over once when he came over to my house, and then I started watching it. I was gonna say the Democrats, they must see the writing on the wall. This new generation is way more progressive. It it
Oh
it
yeah,
must send shivers down their spines to see how progressive and liberal the young generation is,
and the Latinos too. I mean,
and
and let's not
Latinos. Well, yeah,
forget.
I'm
And I don't know
saying,
what other
well, the
groups,
young
what other
generation,
major groups are
but
supporting
And by the way,
Sanders.
when I say young generation, I'm not saying Americans, man. I'm saying all of us, Latinos, African Americans, gay people, whites, especially in places like LA. There's so much interaction amongst the people that it's you're starting to see some of those racial lines get blurred among the young,
Yeah.
and that's great because now they can actually vote for things that matter to them. My maybe this is just me being old, but my personal critique is that they need to be a little more anti-war. I'm all for fighting for equal rights and fighting and helping each other in the gay rights and then the LGBT community. I'm all for fighting for those rights, but we need to be consistent. If we care about each other that way, then we have to care about other people in other parts of the world too, and we can't be
Hmm.
invading. We have to pay more attention to these like foreign interventions that we always find the justification to get involved in. Can we wrap it up with what's going on in Latin America?
Yes, let's do it.
Brazil, 121 confirmed cases. Chile, 61. Peru, 38. Argentina, 34. And Mexico, 23. By the way, have you noticed? Sorry, Uruguay and Venezuela, 10. Have you noticed that they don't give Latino America the same coverage the way that they give to Europe?
Nope.
And right now, Europe is a little bit more out of control, but this is part of that Eurocentric legacy where Europe is more important. Europe,
Hmm.
right? This country has closer ties to Europe, and so they'll always give preferential treatment. If a terrorist attack happens in the Middle East, a terrorist attack happens all the time. People don't change their Facebook profiles when that happens, but something happens in France, and all of a sudden everybody is like, I'm with France, whatever. So Brazil is really interesting because of the president and the other cabinet member that tested positive, and then they were with Donald Trump. I I have a feeling that Trump, I have a sense that he may test positive.
I think so too. And he just don't either he got tested and he doesn't want to share it, or he just doesn't want to seem weak, right? Because it will go against his image of a strong man.
He's too proud to admit that he was wrong. He doesn't want to look like an idiot if he
No.
comes up. But at the same, if he does have it, there's no way that he can hide that. He wouldn't be given public. He wouldn't be out in the public talking to the nation if that were the case. They would find an excuse not to. I don't. If he gets it, I don't think they could keep it under wraps. Because right now he has to constantly be in front of a television and in front of a microphone talking to people. But there's a good chance that he may get it because of the people that he was exposed with. There's too many people around him that were exposed. That'd be a twist if he got it.
Yes, and I think then obviously I don't want anything bad to happen to him, but then Pence will take over, and that will be an interesting dynamic to see if then people will be okay. Well, let's continue the Trump legacy, and then I think him getting sick would almost make him a martyr. So I think it would give him the sympathy, and then it'll be like, oh, he's suffering for the country. We need to support him and the party. So I think it, and it's sad to think of that, but that's exactly how things could get spinned um,
Mm-hmm.
in order to try to squeak out a an election. But I completely agree with you. He was all this time he was attaching his presidency to the economy, to the stock market. So now, like they say, if you if you kill by the sword, you die by the sword. And he pegged his presidency on the economy and the market, and here's the long-awaited retroaction that everybody was, or market correction that people were looking for and anticipating for some time now in the
Yeah.
Obama economy.
No, I agree with you. By the way, whenever people say the expressions like the one that you just said, "You killed by the sword, you die by the sword," I always think, well, what would have happened if you killed by the sword, but then you slipped and fell and you died?
By the sword? Oh, well,
No,
just died regularly.
yeah. What happens in that case? There are people like that.
It's life, bro.
I'm
You
just
fell
saying.
from your horse, or
Sometimes you kill by the sword and you die by the sword, but sometimes you just slip and fall and you snap your neck.
that's true, or you drown or
I
something.
was thinking
See,
about
I,
that.
I like how you really dig deeper.
Dude, these expressions that people use make no sense to me sometimes because the more you
That's
just
true.
start thinking about them and they're absolutely nonsensical. For example, this is relevant to the coronavirus, but look at what Boris from the UK.
Hmm.
What was his
Oh, that
policy?
guy.
Yeah. Uh,
How is the
sorry,
UK
not
doing? I
Boris
know they're
Yeltsin. I
lefty.
knew I screwed that up. Boris Yeltsin is I think the Russian. Let
The
me just
Russian guy, right?
yeah yeah.
It's Boris Johnson. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I wonder how they doing. I wonder how UK is feeling. Like, oh, we left the Corona, the European Union just in time.
yeah, I want to correct myself before somebody else calls me out on it. But yeah, not Boris Yeltsin, Boris Johnson. What he said that the strategy in the UK is to take it on the chin and then just let the virus take its course, and eventually people will develop immunity for it. That's what
Damn.
he said. He said take it on the chin, Boris Johnson. Let's see,
Take it on the
take it.
chin. Man, you gotta love the British, dude.
Let's see. Did he say that? Yeah, on the chin. He said on the chin. I was thinking about that, and I thought it makes absolutely no sense because yeah, you could take it on the chin, but what if it's Mike Tyson that's punching you? It'll kill you. It's completely stupid because it makes an assumption about the person that's hitting you.
Yeah, that's
That the
true.
fact that you can get back up and then just walk it off. If this virus is a Mike Tyson type, there's no getting up. There's no taking it on the chin. Like these expressions that people use make absolutely no sense sometimes. I just sometimes I get caught up on like on that stuff. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. What if it's Mike Tyson?
Good point. Next time I say a cheesy one-liner, I'm gonna think about it for a minute and say, is this gonna come and bite me in the butt?
uh, have any people died? I don't see Colombia here on this list.
Well, I know
What's
that
going on there?
and the interesting thing, because I know you mentioned that there's some folks who are asymptomatic to the virus, and it sounds like apparently there was some news yesterday that the incubation period may be longer than 14 days, that it could be as long as 53 days. Obviously, that would be a disaster because in Colombia there were about 13 or 12 people who were in Wuhan, China, who
Hmm.
were transported back to Colombia, who served the quarantine, and then they were let go. I think it was yesterday or the day before. Um, and actually, I was planning to go to Colombia in a couple of weeks, but I'm not going to go anymore just because I'm not going to risk myself, even if it's, and I don't think Colombia is the issue, is the transit, right? So traveling through LAX, where so many people from the rest of the world travel, is just putting yourself in danger. Romero came in the back of my head. It was like, oh man, that's the probability of you getting something is pretty high.
If you're traveling, yeah, if you're traveling a lot,
Yeah, if you're traveling in general.
yeah, yeah. Or you could always just infect yourself with it now and get it out of the way, and then you're in the clear after that.
Well, that's the thing, because when I came back from, well, my wife has been sick with a cold.
Hmm.
So, I was like, I'm sure I'm gonna get sick because of that. But then when I came back, I was feeling a little, under the weather. So I'm like, could it be corona, or could it be just a regular flu? So I don't know. So that's the thing. Like, you don't know.
In your case, I put my money on it being a hangover.
Yes, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you.
Yeah.
Guayabo, es el guayabo virus.
Okay, we'll see.
Mátame guayabo porque el alcohol no pudo.
We'll follow. We'll stay on it and we'll follow up. We'll do another the next time we meet. We'll see where we are. We'll see how all of my predictions were wrong, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, it'll
Yeah,
be. And this is a rapid moving story, so I'm sure we'll find out soon enough.
sounds good. Are you? What do you think? Anything else that you want to bring up, or you think we're good to end it here?
I think we're good to end it here. Just, I mean, quick shout out to Bad Bunny. You
Oh
can
yeah.
live, since people are gonna be home wondering what to listen to. Just ask their smartphone device to play the Bad Bunny album.
Which one?
Romero's looking it up.
What's the
It's
song that I want to listen to from that album?
well, just pull up the latest album. I think stands for Yo hago lo que quiero or something like that.
Okay.
Y ese is a
This one?
YHL. Do.
See, another expression that is completely meaningless. Yo hago lo que quiero. Under what
Yo hago lo que
circumstances?
quiero.
All the time? Right now? Is he doing whatever he wants right now with the coronavirus? Is he traveling? I
Well,
doubt
he's
it.
doing his thing,
We
man.
got him. I bet you he's not. I bet you right now he's not doing whatever he wants. Ahorita está en la cama, calmadito, protecting
No,
himself.
dude, I think he was in Miami promoting his album, dude.
Yeah, right now he is, pero you don't think he's gonna take precautions at some point? He's gotta take precautions because you think he's gonna go visit his nana after traveling around the world? He's gonna go visit his grandma and get her sick if he potentially came in contact with
Probably
it?
not.
Exactly. So he doesn't do whatever he wants now, does he?